The silhouette of Denver's newly constructed town hall seemed to mock Daisy Allen as she hurried through the rapidly darkening streets, clutching her reticule tightly to her chest. It was 1875, and the Colorado Territory was a harsh place for a woman alone, especially one who had just buried her father and discovered the extent of his gambling debts. Evening was falling fast, casting long shadows across the dusty Main Street, and Daisy knew she should have been home hours ago. Daisy quickened her pace, the hem of her blue calico dress gathering dust as she maneuvered around puddles of murky water and horse droppings. She had spent the day visiting potential employers, hoping her skills as a seamstress might earn her enough to keep a roof over her head. The meetings had gone longer than expected, and now darkness was coming, bringing with it the rowdy nightlife that respectable women avoided. The saloon doors up ahead burst open, spilling light, raucous laughter, and the tinny sound of a piano onto the street. Four men staggered out, their voices raised in a drunken rendition of Buffalo Gals. Daisy's heart sank. There was no way around them. The alley to her right was too dark to risk, and turning back would mean a detour of several blocks. Drawing a deep breath, she lowered her gaze and attempted to walk past them, hoping they were too intoxicated to notice her. But luck was not on her side tonight. "Well, looky here, boys," slurred the tallest of the group, a man with a scraggly beard and whiskey-stained vest. "It's a right pretty little thing out for an evenin' stroll." Daisy kept walking, but the men moved to surround her, forming a swaying circle that cut off her escape routes. "Ain't polite to ignore a gentleman's greeting," said another, reaching for her arm. His breath reeked of cheap whiskey and tobacco. "Please let me pass," Daisy said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "I'm expected at home." The men laughed, closing in tighter. "We'll escort you, darlin'. A lady shouldn't be walking alone at night." Panic rose in Daisy's throat as rough hands grabbed at her sleeves. She clutched her reticule tighter, knowing the small derringer her father had given her was inside, but afraid that drawing it would only escalate the situation. The lady said to let her pass. The deep voice cut through the drunken laughter like a knife. The circle of men parted slightly, and Daisy saw him tall and broad-shouldered, standing in the street with his hands resting casually near the pistols holstered at his hips. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the hard set of his jaw and the intensity in his eyes as he stared down the group of drunks. "This ain't your concern, stranger," growled the bearded man, though he took a small step back. "I'm making it my concern." The cowboy moved forward, positioning himself between Daisy and the drunks. 4 against 1 lady doesn't seem sporting, now does it? There was something in his stance, a coiled readiness that suggested violence was no stranger to him, that made the drunks hesitate. Daisy noticed his right hand wasn't just near his pistol anymore. His fingers were brushing the handle in a casual yet deliberate way. "We was just having some fun," muttered one of the men. "Find your fun elsewhere," the cowboy replied, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable threat. For a tense moment, Daisy thought the drunks might challenge him. Then the bearded one spat in the dirt and motioned to his companions. "Come on, boys, plenty more fun waitin' at Jesse's place." They shuffled away, throwing dark looks over their shoulders but not daring to do more. Only when they disappeared around a corner did the cowboy turn to face Daisy fully. "Are you all right, madam?" he asked, his voice gentler now. In the light spilling from the saloon, Daisy could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. A scar ran along his left cheekbone, but it did nothing to detract from the handsome planes of his face. "Yes, thanks to you," she replied, her voice steadier now. "I'm most grateful for your intervention, Mr. Zachary Blackwood," he supplied, removing his hat in a gesture of respect, "but most folks just call me Zach." "Daisy Allen," she said, offering her hand. When he took it, she noticed calluses that spoke of hard work, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "I misjudged the time. I should have been home before dark." Zach nodded, releasing her hand. "Denver's growing fast, but it's still got its rough edges." "Would you allow me to escort you home safely, Miss Allen?" Daisy hesitated. Her father had raised her to be cautious around strangers, especially men who wore guns so comfortably. But something in Zachary Blackwood's steady gaze reassured her. He had, after all, just rescued her from a potentially dangerous situation. "That would be most kind, Mr. Blackwood," she finally said. "It's not far, just 3 blocks east and 1 north." Zach fell into step beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to protect her if needed. For a while they walked in silence, the sounds of the town laughter from the saloons, a distant argument, the occasional whinny of a horse filling the space between them. "Are you new to Denver?" Daisy asked, finding the silence uncomfortable. "Arrived yesterday," he replied. "I've been working cattle drives up from Texas, but decided it was time for a change." "And what brings you to Denver specifically?" Something flickered across his face, a shadow of memory or emotion, before he shrugged. "Heard there were opportunities here." "The railroad's bringing in new business every day," Daisy nodded. "That's true. My father," she stopped, swallowing hard against the sudden lump in her throat. "My late father always said Denver would be the jewel of the West one day." Zach glanced at her, noting the grief that momentarily darkened her features. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Allen." "Thank you," she said softly. "It's been 2 weeks now." They turned onto a quieter residential street lined with modest houses. Daisy stopped in front of a small, well-kept cottage with lace curtains visible in the windows. "This is me," she said, turning to face her escort. "I don't know how to thank you properly, Mr. Blackwood." "No thanks necessary," he said, placing his hat back on his head. "Just doing what any decent man would do. Nevertheless, I'm grateful." She hesitated, then added, "If you're looking for work, my father's friend Mr. Jenkins owns the livery stable on Market Street. He mentioned needing help, what with all the new business from the railroad." Zach smiled, transforming his serious face. "I appreciate the tip, Miss Allen. I'll look into it tomorrow. Good night then, Mr. Blackwood, and thank you again." "Good night, Miss Allen. Lock your door." Daisy watched as he tipped his hat and walked away, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness. Only when he disappeared did she enter her home, carefully locking the door behind her as he'd instructed. She leaned against it for a moment, her heart still beating a little faster than normal, though, whether from her earlier fright or the encounter with the mysterious cowboy. She couldn't quite say. Morning light filtered through Daisy's window, waking her earlier than she would have liked. Sleep had been elusive, her mind replaying the previous evening's events. The menacing circle of drunks, the fear that had gripped her, and then the timely appearance of Zachary Blackwood. His storm-gray eyes and quiet confidence had stayed with her long after she'd retired to bed. Rising, she splashed water on her face from the basin and dressed quickly in a simple brown skirt and white shirtwaist. There was no time for idle daydreaming, not when her future remained so uncertain. Her father's debts had left her with little more than the house and her meager savings. Finding steady work was imperative. After a simple breakfast of bread and jam, Daisy gathered her samples of embroidery and sewing in a small portfolio and set out for Mrs. Hollister's dress shop. The wealthy widow had seemed interested in Daisy's skills yesterday, but wanted to see more examples of her work. The morning streets of Denver were a stark contrast to the previous night. Merchants were opening their shops, women with market baskets chatted on corners, and children raced to school. Daisy breathed in the crisp mountain air, finding comfort in the routine of the awakening town. As she passed the livery stable, movement caught her eye. A familiar tall figure was leading a magnificent black stallion into the yard. Zachary Blackwood, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, was deep in conversation with old Mr. Jenkins. The two men shook hands, and Daisy realized with a start that Zach had taken her suggestion about employment. She hesitated, unsure whether to acknowledge him or continue on her way. The decision was made for her when Zach looked up and spotted her. A smile broke across his face, and he raised a hand in greeting. After a quick word to Mr. Jenkins, he walked over to where Daisy stood. "Good morning, Miss Allen," he said, his voice carrying the slight drawl she'd noticed the night before. "I took your advice. "So I see," she replied, smiling. "Did Mr. Jenkins have work for you?" "Indeed he did. Starting today," he gestured toward the black horse. "That's Thunder. He's been my only constant companion these past few years." "He's beautiful," Daisy said, admiring the powerful animal. "That he is," Zach agreed. "Mr. Jenkins says I can keep him in the stable in exchange for breaking some of the newer horses he's acquired." There was an awkward pause, both of them searching for what to say next. Finally, Daisy held up her portfolio. "I should be on my way. I have an appointment with Mrs. Hollister about some sewing work." "Of course," Zach nodded. "I hope it goes well for you." "Thank you." She took a step, then turned back. "Mr. Blackwood, that is, if you haven't made other arrangements yet, my neighbor Mrs. Wilkins rents rooms. Her house is just 2 doors down from mine. She's reasonable and keeps a clean house." Zach's eyes warmed at the suggestion. "That's mighty kind of you, Miss Allen. I've been at the boarding house near the station, but it's noisy and not particularly clean." "Mrs. Wilkins serves breakfast and dinner as part of the arrangement," Daisy added. "She's a good cook, too." "I'll inquire this afternoon," he said. "Thank you again." With a nod and a smile, Daisy continued on her way, aware of his gaze following her down the street. She felt a curious lightness in her step that had nothing to do with the beautiful morning. Mrs. Hollister's dress shop was already busy when Daisy arrived. The elegant widow herself, dressed impeccably in a purple day dress with elaborate bustle, was assisting a customer with fabric selections. She gestured for Daisy to wait, and for the next 20 minutes, Daisy observed the shop's operations, noting the styles that seemed most popular among Denver's society ladies. When Mrs. Hollister finally approached, her shrewd eyes took in Daisy's modest attire before focusing on the portfolio. "Let's see what you've brought, Miss Allen," she said, leading Daisy to a small table in the back of the shop. For the next half hour, Daisy displayed her work, delicate embroidery, fine hemming, intricate lacework, while explaining her experience and training. Her mother had been a skilled seamstress before her death 10 years ago and had passed her knowledge to her daughter. "Your stitching is exceptional," Mrs. Hollister admitted, examining a silk handkerchief embroidered with lilies. "And you say you can work with patterns as well?" "Yes, madam. I've made everything from everyday dresses to wedding gowns." Mrs. Hollister tapped her fingers on the table, considering. "I lost my best seamstress last month, married a farmer, and moved to Nebraska, of all places. I have more orders than I can handle with just Betsy and myself." Daisy's heart quickened with hope. "I would be very dedicated, Mrs. Hollister. 6 days a week, 8 until 5, with an hour for lunch," the widow said briskly. $2 a day to start. If your work continues to meet my standards after a month, we'll discuss a raise." It was less than Daisy had hoped for, but more than she'd feared. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning. Wear something presentable. My customers expect a certain standard of appearance." Mrs. Hollister stood, signaling the end of the interview. "And I expect punctuality, Miss Allen." "Not a minute late." "Yes, madam. Thank you for the opportunity." As Daisy left the shop, the weight that had been pressing on her shoulders since her father's death lifted slightly. It wasn't much, but it was a start away to keep her home and feed herself while she figured out the next steps in her new life. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Daisy visited the general store to purchase thread and needles, arranged for credit at the butcher's until her first payday, and spent the afternoon altering one of her mother's old dresses to wear to work. The activity kept her mind occupied, preventing it from wandering too often to thoughts of a certain gray-eyed cowboy. As evening approached, Daisy was preparing a simple supper when a knock at the door startled her. Wiping her hands on her apron, she approached cautiously, calling out, "Who is it?" "Zachary Blackwood, Miss Allen." Surprise and an inexplicable flutter of pleasure coursed through her as she opened the door to find Zach standing on her porch, hat in hand. He'd clearly cleaned up after his day at the livery. His dark hair was damp, and he wore a fresh shirt under his leather vest. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him, "this is unexpected." "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "I wanted to thank you for the recommendation. Mrs. Wilkins had a room available, and I've taken it starting tonight." "That's wonderful," Daisy said, genuinely pleased. She's a good woman, a bit talkative but kind-hearted. She mentioned you'd lost your father recently, Zach said, his expression softening. I'm sorry, it can't be easy being on your own. The simple acknowledgement of her situation, spoken with such genuine understanding, nearly undid Daisy's carefully maintained composure. She blinked rapidly to dispel the sudden moisture in her eyes. Thank you, she managed. It's been challenging. But I secured employment today, so things are looking up. With Mrs. Hollister? When Daisy nodded, he smiled. Congratulations, that's good news. An awkward silence fell between them, neither quite knowing how to proceed. Finally, Zach cleared his throat. Well, I won't keep you from your evening. I just wanted to express my thanks. You're very welcome, Mr. Blackwood. He hesitated, then added, I was wondering. That is, if you're not otherwise engaged, would you consider joining me for supper at the hotel restaurant tomorrow evening? To celebrate your new position. The invitation caught Daisy off guard. It had been a long time since anyone had shown such interest in her. Her father's increasing debts and drinking had gradually isolated them from Denver society over the past few years. That's very kind, she said carefully, but I wouldn't want to impose on your generosity. It would be my pleasure, Zach insisted, unless you'd rather not be seen with a rough cowboy like myself. There was a hint of self-deprecation in his tone, but his eyes watched her reaction closely. Not at all, Daisy said quickly. I'd be honored to accept your invitation, Mr. Blackwood. His face brightened. Excellent. Shall I call for you at 6? 6 would be perfect. After Zach departed, Daisy closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing inexplicably. It was just a friendly supper, she told herself, a kind gesture from a man who had helped her. Nothing more, yet as she returned to her cooking, she couldn't help but wonder what dress she should wear tomorrow evening and whether her mother's garnet earrings would be too formal for the occasion. Daisy's first day at Mrs. Hollister's shop proved both exhausting and rewarding. The work was familiar and soothing. The rhythmic motion of needle through fabric had always calmed her, but the pace was relentless. Mrs. Hollister ran a tight ship, and there was always another seam to finish, another fitting to prepare for. By the time 5 o'clock arrived, Daisy's fingers were sore and her back ached from bending over her work. Yet there was satisfaction in having proven herself capable. Mrs. Hollister had even nodded approvingly at the fine detailing Daisy had added to a child's christening gown. You'll do, Miss Allen, the widow had said, which Daisy understood was high praise indeed. She hurried home, aware that she had only an hour to prepare for her dinner with Zach. The thought both excited and unnerved her. It had been so long since she'd engaged in any social activities. Her father's condition had made such outings impossible in recent years. At home, Daisy quickly bathed and changed into her best dress, a deep blue taffeta with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs. It was somewhat outdated by current fashion standards, but well-made and flattering to her slender figure and fair coloring. She pinned her honey blonde hair into a simple chignon, allowing a few curls to frame her face, and added her mother's small garnet earrings for a touch of elegance. Just as the mantel clock chimed 6, a knock sounded at the door. Taking a deep breath to calm her unexpected nerves, Daisy opened it to find Zach standing on her porch, looking almost unfamiliar in a dark suit and crisp white shirt. His usually tousled hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his stubble. Only the weather-bronzed skin and the scar on his cheekbone remained as reminders of his rugged profession. Miss Allen, he said, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. You look lovely. Thank you, she replied, feeling a blush creep into her cheeks. You clean up rather nicely yourself, Mr. Blackwood, he smiled, offering his arm. Shall we? The Denver House Hotel was the finest establishment in town, catering to wealthy travelers and local elites. Its restaurant, with its crystal chandeliers and white linen tablecloths, was considerably more elegant than anywhere Daisy had dined in recent memory. She felt a momentary panic as they were escorted to their table, wondering if she was properly dressed for such surroundings. Zach seemed to sense her discomfort. I probably should have warned you about the formality, he said quietly as he held her chair, but I wanted our celebration to be special. It's perfect, Daisy assured him, touched by his thoughtfulness. Just unexpected, I haven't been here since. Well, since before my mother passed, Zach's expression softened. How long ago was that? 10 years this October. I was 16. That's a difficult age to lose a mother, he said, genuine sympathy in his voice. I lost mine when I was 12 influenza. My father followed 3 years later. I'm sorry, Daisy said, realizing they shared the experience of being orphaned. Do you have other family? Zach shook his head. A cousin in St. Louis I haven't seen in years. You? None that I know of. My father was an only child, and my mother's family disowned her when she married him. They thought she was marrying beneath her station. Their conversation was interrupted by the waiter, who took their orders and recommended a light wine to accompany the meal. After he departed, Zach leaned forward slightly. How was your first day with Mrs. Hollister? Daisy found herself describing the shop, the customers, and the satisfaction of creating beautiful things with her hands. Zach listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. When their food arrived, tender roast beef with potatoes and fresh vegetables, the conversation shifted to his day at the livery. Jenkins has some fine horses, Zach said, but there's a chestnut mare with a mean streak that's going to be a challenge to break. You seem to have a way with horses, Daisy observed. Have you always worked with them? Since I was old enough to reach the stirrups, he confirmed. My father had a small ranch in Texas, nothing fancy, but he taught me everything about horses, how to read them, how to earn their trust. What happened to the ranch after he died? A shadow crossed Zach's face. Lost it. Bad investments, worse weather. I've been working my way north ever since, taking whatever jobs would keep Thunder and me fed. There was more to the story. Daisy could sense it in the tightness around his mouth, but she didn't press. Everyone had parts of their past they preferred not to discuss. She certainly did. As the evening progressed, Daisy found herself increasingly drawn to Zach's quiet strength and unexpected gentleness. He spoke of his travels with humor and insight, describing the characters he'd met and the landscapes he'd crossed without a trace of self-pity for his hardships. When dessert arrived, apple pie with fresh cream, Daisy realized she was enjoying herself more than she had in years. There was an ease between them that defied their short acquaintance. I've been talking too much, Zach said suddenly, looking slightly embarrassed. My apologies, Miss Allen. Not at all, she assured him. It's refreshing to hear about places beyond Denver. My father used to tell me stories of his younger days when he prospected for gold, but that was long ago. Was he successful? Zach asked. Daisy's smile faded slightly. Not with gold. He did well enough in trade. For many years he owned a hardware store that supplied the miners. But after my mother died, he changed, started drinking, making poor decisions. The business suffered. She hadn't meant to reveal so much, but there was something about Zach that invited confidence. He didn't respond with platitudes or judgment, just a simple nod of understanding. Loss affects people differently, he said quietly. Some find strength in it, others get lost. Yes, Daisy agreed, touched by his insight. I think he got lost without her. Their eyes met across the table, and Daisy felt a connection that transcended words, a recognition of shared experience and mutual understanding. For a moment, it was as if they were the only two people in the crowded restaurant. The spell was broken by the waiter bringing their bill. Zach insisted on paying despite Daisy's protests, and soon they were walking back through the streets of Denver, now lit by gas lamps that cast a warm glow over the boardwalks. The evening air had grown cooler, and Daisy shivered slightly in her light shawl. Without comment, Zach removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of it enveloped her, along with the faint scent of soap and leather that she was beginning to associate with him. Thank you, she said, both for the jacket and the evening. I've had a wonderful time. As have I, he replied, more than I expected. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their steps falling naturally in rhythm. Daisy was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the height and strength of him, the careful way he positioned himself between her and the street. When they reached her cottage, Daisy reluctantly removed his jacket and returned it. Thank you again for a lovely evening, Mr. Blackwood. Zach, he corrected gently. I think we've moved past formalities, don't you? The simple request touched her more deeply than it should have. Zach, she repeated, liking the feel of his name on her lips. Then you must call me Daisy. He smiled, and in the soft light from her porch lamp, his eyes were warm and inviting. For a breathless moment, Daisy thought he might kiss her and was surprised by how much she wanted him to. Instead, he took her hand and pressed it briefly, respectfully. Good night, Daisy. Sleep well. Good night, Zach. As she watched him walk to Mrs. Wilkins' house 2 doors down, Daisy realized that something had shifted inside her. The empty future that had stretched before her after her father's death suddenly seemed full of possibilities, and many of them included the tall cowboy who had stepped between her and danger on a dark Denver street. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to Daisy's life that was both comforting and exciting. Her days were filled with work at Mrs. Hollister's shop, where her skills quickly earned her the respect of both her employer and the customers. Evenings often included Zach's company, sometimes for supper at her cottage or Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house table. Other times for walks through town or visits to the small traveling shows that passed through Denver. With each meeting, Daisy learned more about the man behind the quiet strength. Zach was well-read, having educated himself during long nights on the trail with books borrowed from town libraries. He had a dry wit that emerged when he was comfortable, and a thoughtfulness that showed in small gestures, bringing her wildflowers he'd spotted on his rides, remembering her preference for apple pastries, listening attentively when she spoke of her dreams. For his part, Zach found in Daisy a resilience and quiet dignity that drew him like a moth to flame. She had faced loss and hardship without becoming bitter, maintaining a gentle spirit despite the challenges life had thrown at her. Her laughter, rare at first but increasingly frequent in his company, was a sound he found himself craving. It was on a Sunday afternoon in early June, nearly a month after their first meeting, that their relationship deepened. Zach had suggested a picnic by the creek that ran just outside of town, and Daisy had packed a basket with cold chicken, biscuits, and apple tarts. The day was perfect warm sunshine tempered by a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers. They found a spot beneath a cottonwood tree, spreading a blanket on the grass. Thunder grazed nearby, occasionally lifting his head to check on them before returning to the sweet grass. As they ate, their conversation meandered comfortably from topic to topic, the latest gossip from Mrs. Wilkins about the banker's wife, Zach's progress with the difficult chestnut mare, Daisy's increasing responsibilities at the dress shop. Mrs. Hollister mentioned she might raise my wages next month, Daisy said, pride evident in her voice. She says my work on Mrs. Patterson's ball gown brought in 3 new customers last week. That's wonderful, Zach said, genuinely pleased for her. You deserve it. You work harder than anyone I know. Daisy smiled, touched by his support. It feels good to be valued for my skills. For a while after Father died, I wasn't sure I'd be able to keep the house. And now I think I'll manage. It won't be easy, but with careful budgeting and perhaps some additional sewing work I could take in evenings. She paused, looking out over the creek. It's strange how quickly life can change. A month ago, I felt so alone. Zach's hand covered hers where it rested on the blanket. You're not alone anymore, Daisy. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Daisy turned to find him watching her, his gray eyes intense with an emotion she hadn't seen before. Zach, she began, but he shook his head slightly. There's something I need to tell you, he said, his voice more serious than she'd ever heard it. Something about my past. Daisy's heart quickened. What is it? Zach withdrew his hand and stared out at the creek for a long moment before speaking. I told you my father lost our ranch, and that's true, but I didn't tell you everything. He took a deep breath. After he died, I discovered he'd borrowed money from a man named Fletcher, a cattle baron who'd been trying to buy our land for years. What happened? Daisy asked softly, sensing his struggle. Fletcher claimed the debt gave him rights to our property. When I disputed it, things got ugly. His men came one night, set fire to our barn. Zach's jaw tightened at the memory. I confronted them. There was a fight. One of Fletcher's men drew on me and I shot him. Daisy's eyes widened, but she remained silent, allowing him to continue. It was self-defense, but Fletcher had the local sheriff in his pocket. There was a warrant for my arrest by morning. I took Thunder and what little I could carry and rode out. He finally looked at her, his expression guarded. I've been moving ever since, never staying in one place too long. Until now. Why are you telling me this? Daisy asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Because I care for you, Daisy, more than I expected to care for anyone again. His voice was low and intense. And because you deserve to know who I am before this goes any further between us. Are you still wanted in Texas? She asked, practical despite the racing of her heart at his admission of caring. I don't know. It was 5 years ago now. Fletcher might have given up, or he might still be holding a grudge. Men like him don't forget easily. Daisy considered his words carefully. The man before her was not the impulsive youth who had fled Texas 5 years ago. He was honorable, kind, hardworking, everything her father had taught her to value in a man. Thank you for telling me, she finally said, for trusting me with your past. Relief flickered across his features. Then you don't think less of me? How could I? Daisy asked simply. You defended your home and your life. There's no shame in that. The tension drained from Zach's shoulders. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he reached out to touch her cheek. Daisy Allen, you are the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Her skin tingled where his fingers brushed it. I'm just ordinary, Zach. There's nothing ordinary about you, he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. This time, when he leaned toward her, there was no hesitation. His lips met hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened as Daisy responded. His hand slid to the back of her neck, cradling her head as she tentatively placed her palms against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zach rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since the night I walked you home from the hotel. I've been wanting you to, Daisy admitted, a blush coloring her cheeks. He smiled, the rare, full smile that transformed his serious face and made her heart skip. Then I should have done it sooner. Their second kiss was longer, more confident, an exploration of newfound intimacy that left them both dizzy with possibilities. When Thunder whinnied impatiently, breaking the moment, they both laughed, slightly embarrassed but undeniably happy, as they packed up their picnic and prepared to return to town. Daisy felt as if she was standing on the edge of something vast and wonderful. The future that had seemed so bleak a month ago now shimmered with promise. But as they rode double on Thunder back toward Denver, Zach's arms secure around her, she couldn't help wondering if his past would eventually catch up with them and what would happen when it did. Summer blossomed fully over Denver, bringing hot days and warm nights filled with the scent of dust and sage. Daisy and Zach's courtship progressed with a natural ease that surprised them both. They spent every free moment together, gradually learning each other's histories, dreams, and quirks. Zach became a favorite at Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house, fixing loose floorboards and leaky roofs in his spare time. His work at the livery stable was going well. Jenkins had promoted him to head hostler after seeing his way with difficult horses. Daisy continued to excel at Mrs. Hollister's shop, even beginning to design some simple dresses herself when customers requested it. They were building lives that intersected more with each passing day. Daisy found herself thinking of Zach when she saw a sunset he would appreciate or heard a story that would make him laugh. Zach discovered that his formerly solitary existence now felt empty without Daisy's presence. It was on a sweltering evening in late July that Zach formally declared his intentions. They were sitting on Daisy's small porch after supper, watching lightning flicker on the distant horizon where a storm was building. I've been thinking, Zach said, his voice casual though his eyes were serious. A dangerous pastime, Daisy teased, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. He smiled, perhaps, but necessary. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. Daisy, these past 3 months have been the happiest of my life. Her heart quickened at the intensity in his voice. Mine too, she said softly. I know it hasn't been long by some standards. But I've never been more certain of anything. He shifted to face her fully. I love you, Daisy Allen. I want to build a life with you, a home, a family, if you'll have me. Though she had begun to hope for such a declaration, the reality of it still took her breath away. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Zach nodded, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. I'm asking you to marry me. Joy rushed through Daisy like a spring flood. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you, Zach. His face broke into a radiant smile as he gathered her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It's not much, he said, opening his palm to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. It was my mother's. My father gave it to me before he died, said I should save it for the woman I wanted to spend my life with. Tears welled in Daisy's eyes as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. It's beautiful, she whispered. I'll treasure it always. They sealed their engagement with another kiss, this one gentler but no less meaningful. The future stretched before them, bright with promise despite the gathering storm on the horizon. News of their engagement spread quickly through Denver's tight-knit community. Mrs. Wilkins was delighted, immediately offering to host a small celebration. Mrs. Hollister surprised Daisy with her enthusiasm, even offering to help with a wedding dress. Every bride should have something special, the usually stern woman said, her eyes softening with memories of her own long-ago wedding. Plans were made for a September ceremony simple but proper, to be held in the small church on Pine Street. Daisy and Zach began discussing where they would live after the wedding. Her cottage was too small for a growing family, but they both loved its charm and location. Perhaps we could add on to it, Zach suggested one evening as they sat at her kitchen table, sketching rough plans. A couple more rooms to the back, expand the kitchen a bit. That would be perfect, Daisy agreed, imagining their future home. And maybe someday, when we've saved enough, we could look for a small piece of land outside town. Not a large ranch, but enough for Thunder and perhaps a few other horses. Zach's eyes lit up at the idea. You wouldn't mind living outside of town? I grew up in Denver, but I've always loved the open spaces beyond it, she admitted. There's something appealing about having room to breathe, to grow things. He leaned across the table to kiss her. Have I told you today how much I love you? Daisy pretended to consider, not in the last hour or so. A terrible oversight, he murmured against her lips. Their contentment seemed complete, but life seldom allows happiness to go unchallenged for long. The test of their newfound love came on a dusty afternoon in early August when Daisy was fitting a customer at Mrs. Hollister's shop. The bell above the door jingled, and 3 men entered trail worn and hard-eyed, with the unmistakable look of men who lived rough lives. Daisy barely glanced at them, assuming they were passing through town and perhaps looking for gifts for wives or sweethearts back home. I'll be with you gentlemen in a moment, Mrs. Hollister called from behind the counter where she was cutting fabric. One of the men, tall and lean, with a scar bisecting his right eyebrow, approached instead of waiting. No hurry, madam. We're actually looking for information, not dresses. Something in his tone made Daisy look up from the hem she was pinning. The man's cold eyes were scanning the shop with calculated interest. What sort of information? Mrs. Hollister asked, her voice cooler than before. We're looking for a man, the scarred man said. Goes by Zachary Blackwood. Dark hair, gray eyes, has a scar on his left cheek, rides a black stallion. He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket, got business with him from down Texas way. Daisy felt the blood drain from her face. With trembling fingers, she continued pinning the hem, desperately trying to maintain her composure. Mrs. Hollister, ever observant, noticed her reaction immediately. I'm afraid I don't know anyone by that description, the widow said smoothly. Denver's a growing town, people come and go all the time. The scarred man's eyes narrowed slightly. That's so, because we heard he's been in town for a few months now, works at the livery stable. His gaze shifted to Daisy, who kept her eyes fixed on her work. Perhaps the young lady knows something. Mrs. Hollister stepped between them. Miss Allen is new to my employ and knows very few people in town. Now, if you're not interested in our merchandise, I must ask you to leave. We have customers waiting." For a tense moment, it seemed the man might argue. Then he nodded, touching the brim of his hat. "Much obliged for your time, madam. If you do happen to see a man matching that description, there's a reward for information. He's wanted for murder down in Lerdo." He placed a wanted poster on the counter before leaving, his companions following silently. Only when the door closed behind them did Mrs. Hollister turn to Daisy, who had gone deathly pale. "Finish Mrs. Cooper's fitting in the back room," she instructed quietly. "I'll close up early today." Somehow, Daisy managed to complete her work, her mind racing with fear for Zach. As soon as Mrs. Cooper left, Mrs. Hollister locked the front door and turned the sign to "closed." "That man they're looking for," she said without preamble. "He's your fiancé, isn't he?" Daisy nodded, unable to deny it. "Yes, but it's not what they're saying. He defended himself against men who attacked his home. The man who died drew on him first." To her surprise, Mrs. Hollister merely nodded. "I suspected as much. Blackwood doesn't strike me as a cold-blooded killer." She handed Daisy the wanted poster. "Take this and warn him. Those men will be checking the livery next." Gratitude washed over Daisy. "Thank you," she whispered. "Go out the back way," Mrs. Hollister advised. "And Daisy, be careful. Men like that don't care about the truth. They care about the reward." Daisy slipped out through the alley behind the dress shop, keeping to side streets as she made her way toward the livery stable. Her heart pounded with each step, images of Zach being arrested or worse flashing through her mind. When she reached the stable, she found Mr. Jenkins alone, brushing down a dappled mare. "If you're looking for Zach, he rode out about an hour ago," the old man told her. "Said he was checking on a horse for sale out at the Peterson place." Relief and frustration warred within her. Zach was temporarily safe from the bounty hunters, but she couldn't warn him. "When do you expect him back?" "Not till evening, most likely. Is something wrong, Miss Allen? You look peaked." "There are men in town looking for him," Daisy said, deciding honesty was her best option. "They mean him harm." Jenkins's weathered face hardened. "Those three that just left here, I told them Zach quit last week, headed north to Wyoming." He spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Never liked the look of them. Bounty hunters, I reckon." Daisy nodded, showing him the poster. "It's not true, Mr. Jenkins." Zach was defending himself. "Don't need to convince me, miss. I know a good man when I see one." He thought for a moment. "Those fellas will be watching the roads into town. You best get home and pack whatever you need. I'll have Zach meet you at Widow Simmons's place on the north edge of town as soon as he returns. We're going to run." The reality of what was happening began to sink in. Jenkins nodded grimly. "Just till we can sort this out. I've got friends in the territorial marshal's office who might help, but it'll take time to reach them. Meanwhile, Zach needs to be scarce." Numbness settled over Daisy as she made her way home, keeping to back streets and watching for the bounty hunters. The dream of a peaceful life in Denver was crumbling around her. By the time she reached her cottage, a plan was forming in her mind, desperate perhaps, but the only option she could see. She packed quickly practical clothing, her mother's jewelry, the small amount of savings she kept in a tin behind the stove, and a few cherished mementos she couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else, the furniture, the dishes, the life she'd built, would have to stay. As darkness fell, Daisy made her way to the Widow Simmons's small farm on the outskirts of town. The elderly woman, a friend of Jenkins, welcomed her with grim understanding. "Jenkins sent word," she said, ushering Daisy into her kitchen. "Said you and your young man need to lie low for a spell." "Thank you for helping us," Daisy said, exhaustion and worry evident in her voice. "Pshaw, can't abide bounty hunters myself, vultures, the lot of them." Mrs. Simmons poured her a cup of strong coffee. "Your man should be here soon." Jenkins was going to intercept him before he reached town. True to his word, Jenkins arrived with Zach less than an hour later. The moment Zach saw Daisy, he crossed the room in 3 long strides and gathered her into his arms. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Jenkins told me what happened." "I'm fine," she assured him, clinging to his solid presence. But those men, they have a wanted poster with your name and description. They're asking all over town. Zach's jaw tightened. Fletcher, it has to be. He's never going to let this go. What are we going to do? Daisy asked, pulling back to look into his face. For a moment, pain and regret clouded his features. I have to leave, Daisy. Head west, maybe up into the mountains until this blows over. She corrected firmly. We have to leave. Zach shook his head. I can't ask you to give up your life here, your home, your job, everything you've worked for. You're not asking, I'm telling. Daisy's chin lifted in the stubborn gesture he'd come to know well. Where you go, I go. We promise to build a life together, remember, for better or worse. We're not married yet, he reminded her softly. A technicality, she retorted. I love you, Zachary Blackwood. If you think I'm going to let you ride off into the sunset alone while I sit here wringing my hands, you don't know me very well. Despite the gravity of their situation, a smile tugged at Zach's lips. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Fortunate for you, she replied, her eyes never leaving his. Jenkins cleared his throat. If you two are done deciding what's already been decided, we need to make plans. Those bounty hunters will have the main roads watched by morning. For the next hour, they plotted a route that would take Zach and Daisy through little-used mountain trails toward a small settlement near the Continental Divide where Jenkins had friends. Mrs. Simmons contributed provisions, while Jenkins provided detailed maps and advice on where to find water and shelter. What about Thunder? Zach asked, concerned for his faithful companion. The mare you were looking at today, the Peterson's Bay, I bought her, Jenkins said. She's gentle but strong. Good for a lady rider. Thunder can carry your supplies. Daisy's eyes widened. You bought a horse for me. Why would you do that? The old hostler shrugged, embarrassed by his generosity. You two remind me of me and my Martha when we were young. Besides, Blackwood's the best hand I ever had. Consider it an early wedding present. As midnight approached, it was time to leave. Daisy changed into the split riding skirt she'd packed, securing her hair under a wide-brimmed hat. Zach checked and loaded the revolver he carried, then helped Jenkins prepare the horses. When all was ready, Daisy embraced Mrs. Simmons, tears in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Live well and be happy, the widow replied simply. That's thanks enough. Zach shook Jenkins's hand. I owe you my life. Just see you use it well, the older man replied gruffly. And take care of that girl. She's risking everything for you. I know, Zach said, his gaze finding Daisy in the darkness. I won't forget it. Under the cover of night, they rode out, leaving behind the safety of Denver for an uncertain future in the wilderness. As the lights of the town faded behind them, Daisy felt a curious mixture of fear and exhilaration. The life she had planned was gone, but Zach rode beside her, and somehow that made the unknown ahead feel like an adventure rather than an exile. The first 3 days of their journey passed without incident. They kept to the high country, following game trails and old Indian paths that wound through dense pine forests and across alpine meadows bursting with wildflowers. By day, they rode steadily westward, keeping a watchful eye for signs of pursuit. At night, they made cold camps, not daring to risk a fire that might betray their location. Despite the circumstances, Daisy found a surprising joy in the journey. The mountains were breathtaking, jagged peaks thrust against an impossibly blue sky, valleys carpeted with lush grass, streams so clear she could count the pebbles beneath the rushing water. Each day brought new wonders. A family of deer grazing at dawn, an eagle soaring on thermals, sunset painting the western faces of the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Zach watched her delight with a mixture of love and guilt. I'm sorry you had to leave everything behind, he said on the third evening as they made camp in a sheltered grove of aspens. Daisy, arranging their bedrolls beneath a makeshift shelter of pine boughs, looked up in surprise. Don't be. I've never seen anything so beautiful as these mountains. But your home, your work are things, she interrupted. Important things, yes, but still just things. She moved to where he was securing the horses, placing a hand on his arm. You're what matters, Zach. We'll build a new home, find new work, as long as we're together. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might vanish if he let go. What did I do to deserve you? he murmured against her hair. "You stood between me and danger," she reminded him. "Now I'm doing the same for you." The kiss they shared was tender yet passionate, a reaffirmation of the bond that had brought them to this wild place. When they separated, both were breathless and reluctant. "Soon," Zach promised, his voice rough with desire. "When we're safe, properly married, yes," Daisy agreed, though part of her wished soon could be now. The closeness forced upon them by their flight sleeping side by side beneath the stars, helping each other with the small intimacies of trail life, had intensified the attraction between them to an almost unbearable degree. On the fourth day, a summer storm caught them crossing a high meadow. Within minutes, they were drenched, the temperature dropping rapidly as thunder rolled across the peaks. Shelter became imperative. "There's an old trapper's cabin about 2 miles ahead," Zach shouted over the downpour, consulting Jenkins's map. "If it's still standing, we can wait out the storm there." They urged their tired horses through the deluge, finally spotting the cabin nestled against a rock face at the edge of the tree line. It was small and weathered, but intact, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table, and a narrow cot against one wall. "Not exactly the Denver House Hotel," Zach commented as they led the horses into the lean-to attached to the cabin's side. "It's perfect," Daisy said, shivering as she helped him unsaddle the animals and rub them down. Inside, the cabin was dusty but dry. While Zach checked the chimney to ensure it was clear, Daisy swept the worst of the dirt from the floor with a bundle of pine branches. Together, they gathered wood from the stack behind the cabin, grateful that some previous occupant had left it well supplied. Soon a fire was crackling in the fireplace, filling the small space with warmth and light. They hung their soaked outer clothing on a line strung near the hearth, then shared a simple meal of jerky, hard bread, and coffee brewed in a battered pot they found on a shelf. As darkness fell, the storm intensified. Rain lashed against the single window and wind moaned through the pine trees surrounding the cabin. Inside, however, it was warm and surprisingly cozy. Daisy sat on the edge of the cot, combing out her damp hair with her fingers, while Zach added another log to the fire. "We should reach Jenkins's friends in about 3 more days," he said, studying the map by firelight. "If the weather improves." Daisy nodded, watching the play of firelight on his features. With his hair still damp from the rain and his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, he looked younger, less burdened by the cares that normally shadowed his eyes. "What will we do when we get there?" she asked. Zach looked up, his expression thoughtful. "Jenkins said his friend Miller might have worked for me at his sawmill. It's a small settlement, but growing. They need skilled labor." He set the map aside. "It won't be the life I wanted to give you, at least not at first, but we'll be together safe." "That's all I need," Daisy assured him. He crossed to the cot, sitting beside her. "Are you sure, Daisy? It's not too late to change your mind. I could take you back to Denver." She silenced him with a finger to his lips. "Stop. I've made my choice, Zach. I choose you, today, tomorrow, always." The intensity in her eyes took his breath away. Slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wished, he bent to kiss her. What began as gentle reassurance quickly deepened into something more urgent, months of restraint giving way to the hunger they'd both been fighting. Daisy's arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer as his hands slid down to her waist. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their eyes dark with desire. "Daisy," Zach whispered, his voice strained, "we should stop." "Why?" she asked simply. "We're promised to each other. God knows when we'll find a preacher out here. Does it matter if the words are said now or later?" Zach searched her face, finding only certainty there. "Are you sure? I don't want you to have regrets." In answer, Daisy reached up to unbutton the top of her chemise. "The only regret I'd have is wasting the time we have together. I love you, Zachary Blackwood. Make me your wife in every way that matters." His resistance crumbled. With reverent hands, he helped her remove the simple garments she wore, his breath catching at the sight of her pale skin in the firelight. His own clothes followed, and then there was nothing between them but the love that had brought them to this moment. Their coming together was both awkward and beautiful. painful and exquisite, the inevitable union of two souls who had recognized each other from the first. Afterward, as they lay tangled together on the narrow cot, the storm still raging outside, Daisy felt a sense of completion she had never known before. "I love you," Zach murmured against her hair, his arms tightening around her. "Whatever happens, remember that." "Nothing will happen," she assured him sleepily. "We're going to be fine." But fate had other plans for the lovers in the mountains. Dawn broke clear and cold, the storm having washed the world clean during the night. Daisy woke first, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings and the warm weight of Zach's arm across her waist. The events of the previous night came rushing back, bringing a blush to her cheeks and a smile to her lips. Carefully, so as not to wake him, she slipped from the cot and dressed quickly in the chill morning air. The fire had died to embers during the night, and she knelt to revive it, adding kindling and small branches until flames danced once more in the stone hearth. Outside, she found their horses restless but unharmed in the lean-to. After giving them water and the last of their grain, she explored the area around the cabin, delighting in the freshness of the mountain air after the storm. A small stream tumbled down the rocks nearby, providing clean water for drinking and washing. When she returned to the cabin, Zach was awake and dressed, watching for her with an expression that warmed her more thoroughly than the fire. "I thought you'd run off," he teased, pulling her into his arms for a lingering kiss. "Never," she promised when they parted, "though I did find a beautiful spot by the stream that would be perfect for breakfast." They ate a leisurely meal in the sunshine, neither mentioning the need to continue their journey. For a few precious hours, it was as if they were simply a young couple on an adventure, with no bounty hunters pursuing them and no uncertain future awaiting them. Reality intruded as they were packing up to leave. The distant but unmistakable sound of horses' hooves on the trail below reached them, freezing them both in place. "Could be trappers," Daisy suggested hopefully, but Zach was already moving, gathering their belongings with swift efficiency. "Maybe," he said, though his expression was grim, "but we can't risk it. Quick into the trees, I'll get the horses." Heart pounding, Daisy grabbed their packs and slipped into the dense forest behind the cabin. Zach joined her moments later, leading Thunder and the bay mare Jenkins had provided. They worked silently to secure their belongings, ears straining for any sound from the approaching riders. The voices, when they came, confirmed their worst fears. Tracks lead right up to that cabin, a man called the same scarred bounty hunter who had entered Mrs. Hollister's shop. "Two horses, one heavier than the other. Could be our man and a companion." "Why would Blackwood come this way?" another voice asked. "Ain't nothing up here but wilderness." "Man's running, scared," the first voice replied. "Probably figures we wouldn't follow him into the high country. He's wrong." Zach and Daisy exchanged glances, both understanding the danger they were in. The bounty hunters were closer than they'd feared and clearly determined. "We need to move," Zach whispered. "There's a game trail that leads up to the ridge. If we can reach it without being seen, we might lose them in the higher terrain." Daisy nodded, her face pale but resolute. They mounted silently, Zach leading the way through the trees with exquisite care to avoid snapping branches or dislodging stones that might betray their presence. The game trail was narrow and steep, forcing them to proceed in single file. Daisy focused on maintaining her balance, grateful for the sure-footed mare beneath her. Behind them, shouts indicated the bounty hunters had reached the cabin and discovered it recently occupied. "They'll follow," Zach said grimly when they paused to rest the horses on a small plateau. "They're too close to give up now." "What do we do?" Daisy asked, fighting to keep the fear from her voice. Zach studied the terrain ahead, his expression hardening with resolve. "There's a place about 5 miles ahead a canyon where the trail splits. Jenkins marked it on the map." He turned to face her fully. "Daisy, I need you to do something for me, and I need you not to argue." Alarm flared in her chest. "What are you planning?" "When we reach the split, you're going to take the right fork. It leads to a valley where there's a small settlement, not the one we were heading for, but close enough. Jenkins said there's a mission there run by Franciscan friars." "And you," she demanded, though she already knew the answer. I'll take the left fork. It climbs higher into rougher country. I'll leave signs that both of us went that way, broken branches, disturbed ground. With luck, they'll follow me and leave you alone. No, Daisy said flatly. I won't leave you. Zach took her hands, his grip almost painful in its intensity. Listen to me. These men don't care about you, they want me and the bounty. If we separate, you'll be safe. I can move faster alone, lose them in the mountains, then circle back to find you. And if they catch you? Tears burned in her eyes. What then, Zach? They won't, he promised. I know these mountains better than they do, but I can't focus on evading them if I'm worried about your safety every step of the way. Daisy wanted to argue further, but the logic of his plan was undeniable. Together they were vulnerable, separated, at least one of them might escape. Swear to me you'll be careful, she finally said, her voice breaking. Swear you'll come back to me. I swear it, he vowed, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Wait for me at the mission, 3 days. If I haven't come by then, don't, she interrupted. Don't say it, you'll come. They rode hard for the next 2 hours, reaching the canyon as the sun reached its zenith. The trail split just as Jenkins had indicated, one path continuing along the canyon floor toward a distant valley, the other climbing steeply up the rocky slope. This is it, Zach said, reining Thunder to a halt. Remember, right fork to the valley. The mission should be visible once you're clear of the trees. Daisy nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. Zach dismounted and helped her down from her mare, holding her close for what might be the last time. I love you, he whispered against her lips. Remember that, whatever happens. Come back to me, she replied, kissing him with desperate intensity. That's all I ask. With visible effort, Zach pulled away. He remounted Thunder, then deliberately led his horse across the entrance to the right fork, trampling the ground thoroughly before heading up the left path. Daisy understood he was creating clear signs for the bounty hunters to follow, drawing them away from her. She waited until he disappeared around a bend in the trail, then urged her mare toward the right fork, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Survival now depended on speed and caution. Grieving would come later if there was reason to grieve. For hours, Daisy rode steadily downward, the canyon walls gradually giving way to gentler slopes covered with pine and aspen. When she finally emerged from the trees late that afternoon, she saw the valley spread before her, a green expanse dotted with small farms, and in the distance, what appeared to be a cluster of buildings surrounding a white-walled structure topped with a cross. The mission. Safety. Relief weakened her limbs as she guided her tired mare down the final slope toward the valley floor. She had made it. Now she could only pray that Zach would keep his promise and return to her. The mission of San Francisco de Asís was a haven of peace in the wilderness, a compound of adobe buildings surrounding a small church, with gardens and orchards stretching behind it. Daisy was received with kindness by the friars, who asked few questions about her journey and offered food, shelter, and comfort without condition. Father Miguel, the elderly priest who led the small community, listened gravely when Daisy explained her situation, omitting only the details of the charges against Zach. You are welcome here for as long as necessary, my daughter, he assured her. We receive many travelers in need of sanctuary. For 3 days, Daisy waited, helping in the mission's garden and kitchen to keep her mind occupied. Each evening, she walked to the edge of the compound, scanning the trail that led from the mountains, hoping to see a familiar figure on a black horse. On the morning of the 4th day, with still no sign of Zach, despair began to creep into her heart. Had the bounty hunters caught him? Was he lying injured somewhere in the vast wilderness, unable to reach her? She was weeding the herb garden, tears falling silently onto the thyme and rosemary, when Father Miguel found her. "Señorita Daisy," he said gently, "there is someone asking for you at the gate." Hope surged through her as she scrambled to her feet, but the priest's expression was cautious rather than joyful. "It is not your young man," he clarified. "It is an older gentleman who says he is a friend of Mr. Jenkins from Denver." Confusion replaced hope. "Mr. Jenkins? Here." The old hostler was waiting in the mission's small receiving room, his weathered face lined with worry and fatigue. When he saw Daisy, relief washed over his features. "Thank God," he said, rising to take her hands. "I wasn't sure you'd made it this far. Mr. Jenkins, what are you doing here?" "How did you find me?" "I've been tracking you since I got word the bounty hunters were closing in," he explained. "Came by a different route, hoping to warn you in time. When I reached the trapper's cabin and saw signs of pursuit, I feared the worst." "Zach and I separated at the canyon," Daisy told him, her voice trembling. "He drew them away from me, up into the higher country. He promised to meet me here in 3 days, but it's been 4 now and there's been no sign of him." Jenkins's expression darkened. "The bounty hunters came through the settlement yesterday, asking questions. They didn't find what they were looking for." "Then they didn't catch him?" Hope flared in Daisy's chest. "No," Jenkins confirmed, "but they're still hunting, and there's more. Fletcher himself is with them now." "Fletcher, the man who wants Zach dead," fear replaced hope. "How can that be?" "Arrived on the stage 2 days after you left Denver. Apparently he's decided to handle matters personally." Jenkins sighed heavily. "It's worse than we thought, Daisy. Fletcher isn't just after Zach for killing his man, he wants Thunder. The horse. Why? Thunder's bloodlines. He's the last of a line of thoroughbreds that Fletcher's been trying to acquire for years. Zach's father refused to sell even when he was desperate for money. To a man like Fletcher, that's an insult he can't forgive." Daisy tried to absorb this new information. "So all of this, the bounty, the charges, it's about a horse. Partly. It's also about pride. Fletcher doesn't lose, and he doesn't forgive those who cross him." Jenkins rubbed a hand over his face. "We need to find Zach before they do." "But how? The mountains are vast, and if he's hiding, I know these mountains better than most," Jenkins interrupted, "and I think I know where he might go if he was trying to lose pursuers." He glanced toward the window, where the afternoon light was already beginning to fade. "We'll leave at first light tomorrow." "I'm coming with you," Daisy said firmly. Jenkins nodded, not bothering to argue. "Get some rest tonight, it'll be a hard ride." That night, Daisy knelt in the mission's small chapel, praying for Zach's safety with a fervor she hadn't felt since her mother's final illness. The simple faith of her childhood had been tested by her father's decline and death, but now she reached for it like a lifeline. "Please," she whispered to the flickering candles before the altar. "Please keep him safe, bring him back to me." Dawn found her ready, dressed in the practical riding clothes she'd packed, her few belongings secured in saddlebags. Jenkins was waiting in the courtyard with their horses and supplies provided by the generous friars. "The place I'm thinking of is about a day's ride from here," he explained as they mounted. "There's an old mining camp in a box canyon abandoned years ago when the silver played out. It's well hidden, easy to defend. If Zach needed a place to hole up, that would be it." They rode north, skirting the edge of the valley before turning east into the foothills. The terrain grew steadily more rugged, forcing them to proceed carefully. Jenkins set a punishing pace, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. By late afternoon, they had climbed well into the mountains, following a narrow trail that wound through dense forest. Jenkins held up a hand suddenly, signaling Daisy to stop. "Look there," he said quietly, pointing to a broken branch beside the trail. "Someone came through here recently, and there," he dismounted, examining what appeared to be a partial hoofprint in a patch of soft earth. "A big horse, heavily loaded." "Thunder," Daisy breathed. Jenkins nodded. "And heading in the direction of the old camp. We're on the right track." They continued with renewed purpose, Jenkins now scanning the trail constantly for signs of passage. As dusk approached, they crested a ridge and looked down into a narrow canyon nestled between towering rock walls. "There it is," Jenkins said, pointing to a cluster of weathered wooden structures barely visible among the trees. "The old Silverado mine." No smoke rose from the buildings, no movement caught their eye. The camp appeared deserted. "He could be keeping a cold camp to avoid detection," Jenkins suggested, noting Daisy's crestfallen expression. "Let's go down, but carefully. If he's there, he'll be watching for pursuit." They descended slowly, leading their horses to minimize noise. As they neared the first of the buildings, an old assay office with broken windows, Jenkins drew his revolver. "Stay behind me," he murmured. "Just in case." The camp was eerily silent as they moved between the decaying structures. Most had collapsed partially, their roofs caved in from years of winter snow. Only the largest building, presumably once the mine office, remained relatively intact. Its door stood partially open, swinging slightly in the evening breeze. Jenkins approached cautiously, pushing it wider with the barrel of his gun. "Zach," he called softly. "It's Jenkins and Daisy. You in there, son?" No response came from the dark interior. Steeling himself, Jenkins stepped inside, Daisy close behind him. The single room was empty of human presence, but signs of recent occupation were evident. A bedroll spread in one corner, the ashes of a small fire in the stone fireplace, saddlebags and provisions stacked neatly against one wall. "He was here," Daisy said, hope and worry warring in her voice. "Where could he have gone?" Jenkins holstered his weapon, examining the room more carefully. "Not long ago, either. These ashes are still warm." He moved to the window, scanning the surrounding area. "His horse isn't in the corral out back. He might have gone hunting or scouting the area for signs of pursuit. Or the bounty hunters found him," Daisy said, voicing her deepest fear. "I don't think so." Jenkins pointed to the orderly arrangement of supplies. "No signs of a struggle, everything's neat, like he planned to return." He checked the provisions. He even left some of his food behind. "No, he's coming back. We'll wait." They settled in to wait, Jenkins building a small fire in the fireplace as darkness fell. Daisy paced anxiously, unable to relax despite her exhaustion from the day's journey. "Try to rest," Jenkins advised. "I'll keep watch." But rest was impossible. Every sound from outside, the hooting of an owl, the rustle of wind through pine needles, brought her to alert attention, hoping it heralded Zach's return. Hours passed. Jenkins dozed by the fire while Daisy kept vigil by the window, watching the moon rise over the canyon walls. When she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats, she almost didn't trust her senses. "Mr. Jenkins," she whispered urgently, "someone's coming." The old hostler was instantly awake, hand moving to his gun. "Stay back from the window," he ordered, moving to peer outside. A rider on a dark horse was approaching the camp slowly, as if exercising caution. In the moonlight, it was impossible to distinguish features, but the size and shape of the horse were unmistakable. "It's Thunder," Jenkins confirmed, "and that's Zach on his back." Daisy's heart leaped. Before Jenkins could stop her, she was out the door and running toward the approaching rider. "Zach," she called, heedless of the potential danger. "Zach, it's me." The rider spurred his horse forward at the sound of her voice. As they drew closer, Daisy could see it was indeed Zach, though he was slumped forward in the saddle in a way that sent alarm coursing through her. "Daisy." His voice was weak, disbelieving. "How did you?" He swayed dangerously, and Daisy realized with horror that his shirt was dark with what could only be blood. As Thunder came to a stop beside her, Zach pitched sideways from the saddle, barely conscious. Jenkins was there in an instant, helping her lower Zach gently to the ground. In the moonlight, they could see the extent of his injuries: a bullet wound in his left shoulder and what appeared to be a knife slash across his ribs. "Get him inside," Jenkins ordered. "Quick, before whoever did this comes looking to finish the job." Together, they half-carried, half-dragged Zach into the cabin. Once inside, Jenkins examined the wounds by firelight while Daisy heated water. "Bullet went clean through," he reported. "That's good." "The knife wound is shallow but long. He's lost a lot of blood, but if we can clean these and stop the bleeding, he's got a chance." For the next hour, they worked desperately to save Zach's life. Jenkins, with the practical experience of a man who had lived rough for decades, cleaned and bandaged the wounds while Daisy supported Zach's head, helping him swallow water and the strong whiskey Jenkins produced from his saddlebags. "Fletcher," Zach murmured as they worked, drifting in and out of consciousness. "Ambushed me at the stream, 3 of them." "Don't try to talk," Daisy soothed, brushing sweat-dampened hair from his forehead. "Just rest, you're safe now." "Never safe," he muttered, "not while Fletcher lives." Eventually, the bleeding stopped and Zach fell into an exhausted sleep. Daisy sat beside him, holding his hand while Jenkins kept watch at the window. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. "He can't travel like this." Jenkins's weathered face was grim in the firelight. "We have no choice. Fletcher and his men will be tracking him, probably already are. We need to move him somewhere safer and soon." "The mission," Jenkins shook his head. "Too obvious, they'll check there first." He considered for a moment. "There's a place about 15 miles west of here, a hot spring in a sheltered valley. Few people know about it. The Ute consider it sacred. Leave it alone. We might be safe there long enough for him to heal." "When do we leave?" "First light," Jenkins decided. "We'll make a travois for Thunder to pull. Zach won't be able to sit a horse for a while." Through the long night, Daisy maintained her vigil, bathing Zach's face when fever threatened, whispering words of encouragement when pain made him restless. By dawn he was more lucid, though still weak from blood loss. "You shouldn't be here," were his first coherent words to her. "It's too dangerous." "Hush," she replied, kissing his forehead. "Where else would I be but with my husband?" A ghost of a smile touched his pale lips. "Not official yet." "Official enough for me," she assured him. "Now rest. We're moving you to somewhere safer today." Jenkins had been busy while they talked, constructing a simple travois from branches and blankets. With difficulty, they managed to get Zach settled on it, secured with ropes to prevent him from sliding off on the rough terrain. "It won't be comfortable," Jenkins warned as they prepared to leave, "but it's the best we can do." The journey that followed was a nightmare of slow progress over difficult ground. Zach endured it stoically, though Daisy could see the pain etched in the lines around his mouth and eyes. They stopped frequently to check his wounds and give him water, each time scanning their back trail for signs of pursuit. By mid-afternoon, the terrain began to change, the pine forest giving way to a narrow valley lush with vegetation that suggested greater moisture. The air grew warmer, carrying a faint mineral scent. "We're getting close," Jenkins said, pointing ahead to where steam rose between the trees. "The hot spring is just beyond that rise." The valley, when they reached it, was like something from a dream, a hidden paradise of natural pools terraced down a gentle slope, surrounded by smooth rocks and lush grass. The water in the pools steamed gently in the cool mountain air, clear and inviting. "The Ute believe the spring has healing powers," Jenkins explained as they carefully lifted Zach from the travois. "I don't know about that, but the warm water will help with the pain, and it's as good a place as any to recover." They made camp in a sheltered hollow near the lowest pool, using branches and the travelers' own blankets to create a crude shelter. Daisy helped Zach bathe in the warm mineral water, supporting him as he soaked his battered body. The relief on his face was immediate and profound. "That feels like heaven," he murmured as she helped him back to their camp. For 3 days they remained at the hot spring, Zach growing stronger with each passing day. The bullet wound began to heal cleanly, and the knife slash across his ribs, while painful, showed no signs of infection. Daisy tended him with unwavering devotion, while Jenkins maintained a constant watch for danger. On the 4th day, Jenkins announced he would ride back toward the mission to gather supplies and information. "We need to know if Fletcher is still searching or if he's given up and gone back to Texas," he explained. "I'll be as quick as I can." After he left, Daisy and Zach were alone for the first time since their separation at the canyon. Despite his injuries, Zach insisted on sitting outside their shelter, enjoying the sunshine and the peaceful surroundings. "It's beautiful here," Daisy said, settling beside him on a sun-warmed rock. "I can see why the Ute consider it sacred." Zach nodded, his arm around her shoulders. "If things were different, I'd build you a cabin right here. We could live like this, just us, the mountains, the changing seasons." "I'd like that," she said softly. "But things aren't different, are they? Fletcher is still out there." Zach's expression hardened. "Yes, and he won't stop. Not until one of us is dead." "There has to be another way," Daisy insisted. "We could go farther west, California, Oregon, start fresh where he can't find us." "He'd find us," Zach said with certainty. "Men like Fletcher don't forget or forgive, and now that he knows about you." He pulled her closer. "I won't risk your life, Daisy, I can't." "What are you saying?" She pulled back to look into his face, alarmed by the resolve she saw there. When Jenkins returns, if Fletcher is still in the area, I'm going to end this, once and for all, by confronting him. That's madness, fear clutched at Daisy's heart. He has hired guns, Zach, you'd be outnumbered. Not if I choose the battlefield, Zach replied grimly. Not if I make him come to me alone. And how would you manage that? Daisy demanded. Zach was silent for a long moment. Thunder, he finally said. Fletcher wants him almost as much as he wants me dead. If I send word that I'm willing to trade the horse for our freedom, he'll come. And then what? You'd kill him in cold blood. Daisy's voice shook with emotion. That would make you exactly what he claims. You are a murderer. The words struck home. Zach flinched as if she'd slapped him. What choice do I have? Let him hunt us for the rest of our lives, always looking over our shoulders, never knowing when he might find us. We find another way, Daisy insisted. There's always another way. Before Zach could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats silenced them both. They tensed, Zach reaching for the revolver Jenkins had left with him, but it was the old hostler himself who appeared through the trees, riding hard. Fletcher's men are coming, he called as he dismounted. They picked up our trail at the mining camp. They're maybe 2 hours behind me. How many? Zach asked, struggling to his feet. Fletcher and 3 others. Jenkins was already gathering their belongings. We need to move now. No, Zach said, his voice steady despite the pain evident on his face. This ends here. I'm tired of running. Don't be a fool, boy, Jenkins snapped. You're in no condition to fight 4 armed men. I don't plan to fight them, Zach replied. I plan to talk to Fletcher, offer him a deal. What kind of deal could you possibly offer that man? Jenkins demanded. Thunder. Zach's hand rested on his gun. And myself. No, Daisy cried, grabbing his arm. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. Zach cupped her face gently. Listen to me, I'm not planning to die today, but Fletcher needs to see that I'm willing to face him man to man. It's the only way he might agree to end this. And if he doesn't? Tears streamed down Daisy's face. If he just decides to shoot you on sight, then Jenkins gets you safely away from here, Zach said firmly. Promise me that, old man. Jenkins looked torn but finally nodded. I promise, but I think you're making a mistake. Maybe, Zach acknowledged. But it's my mistake to make, he turned to Daisy. I need you to ride out with Jenkins, get to higher ground where you can see what happens without being seen. I won't leave you, she protested. You must, he insisted. I can't do what needs to be done if I'm worrying about your safety. Please, Daisy, trust me one last time. The anguish in his eyes broke her resistance. 1 hour, she finally said. If it's not resolved in 1 hour, I'm coming back for you. It was the best compromise he could hope for. 1 hour, he agreed. They worked quickly after that, preparing for Fletcher's arrival. Jenkins led Daisy and the horses to a concealed position on a ridge overlooking the valley, while Zach remained near the hot spring, sitting calmly on a rock with his revolver within easy reach. The wait was excruciating. From her vantage point, Daisy could see Zach clearly, a solitary figure in the peaceful valley, wounded but unbowed. When 4 riders appeared at the valley's entrance, her heart nearly stopped. Even at a distance, Fletcher was unmistakable, a big man on a big horse, silver-haired and expensively dressed, flanked by 3 rough-looking men with rifles. They approached cautiously, spreading out as they neared Zach. That's far enough, Zach called when they were about 30 yards away. His voice carried clearly in the still mountain air. Just you, Fletcher, your men stay back. To Daisy's surprise, the silver-haired man motioned for his companions to halt, then rode forward alone. He stopped about 10 feet from Zach, studying him with cold calculation. You look half dead already, Blackwood, Fletcher's deep voice boomed. Saved me some trouble. Maybe, Zach replied evenly. Or maybe I've saved us both some trouble. I want to offer you a deal. Fletcher laughed without humor. What could you possibly offer me? Thunder. Zach gestured to where the black stallion was tethered nearby. The horse you've wanted for years, and a public statement that I fired first in Lerdo that your man was defending himself. In exchange for what? Fletcher's voice was suspicious. You drop the charges, leave me and mine in peace. Zach's gaze was steady. This feud ends today, one way or another. Fletcher dismounted, studying Zach with narrowed eyes. Why would I agree to that when I could just kill you and take the horse anyway? Because deep down, you're a businessman, not a killer, Zach replied. And because I'm offering you a way to get what you want without adding murder to your sins. A tense silence fell between the two men. On the ridge, Daisy held her breath, one hand clutching Jenkins's arm in a grip that would leave bruises. You know, Fletcher finally said, your father made me a similar offer once, right before he died, said I could have the horse if I'd cancel his debt. And you refused, Zach stated. I did, told him I'd take the horse anyway after he was gone. Fletcher paced a few steps, his back to Zach. He laughed at me, said his son would never let that happen. He was right, Zach said quietly, but circumstances change. I have something now that matters more to me than a horse or a grudge. Fletcher turned, eyebrows raised. The girl. Jenkins's widow mentioned her when my men questioned her in Denver, said you'd run off with some seamstress. Daisy's heart pounded as Fletcher mentioned her. On the ridge, Jenkins tensed, his hand moving to his gun. Leave her out of this, Zach warned. This is between you and me. Fletcher studied him thoughtfully. You really love her, don't you, enough to give up everything else? Yes, Zach said simply, another long silence. Fletcher looked from Zach to Thunder and back again, as if weighing his options. You know, he finally said, I believed your father killed himself out of shame when he lost everything. It never occurred to me he might have done it to protect you, to keep me from coming after you for the horse. Zach's face betrayed nothing, but Daisy could see the tension in his shoulders. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe this has gone on long enough. Fletcher sighed heavily. 5 years chasing a horse and a grudge makes a man wonder what it's all been for. Hope flickered in Daisy's chest as she watched the exchange. Was it possible Fletcher was considering Zach's offer? Here's my counter-offer, Fletcher said abruptly. I keep the bounty active for another month, long enough for rumors to spread that you've been killed in the mountains. Then it quietly disappears. You stay away from Texas permanently, and I never hear the name Blackwood again. And Thunder. Zach asked. Fletcher glanced at the magnificent stallion. Keep him. Consider it a wedding present for your seamstress. A hint of a smile touched his weathered face. My wife would approve. She always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Disbelief and cautious hope warred on Zach's face. Why the change of heart? Let's just say 5 years is a long time to hold a grudge, Fletcher replied, and I'm not getting any younger. Besides, the real value of that horse was always in his bloodline. If you're agreeable, I'd like to send a mare to him next spring, start a new line. Zach considered this for a moment, then nodded. I think that could be arranged. Then we have a deal. Fletcher extended his hand. After a slight hesitation, Zach took it. We have a deal. From her vantage point, Daisy could hardly believe what she was seeing. The two men, enemies for so long, shook hands firmly, the gesture somehow more binding than any written contract could have been. Fletcher mounted his horse and rejoined his men, speaking briefly to them before the group rode away from the valley. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Daisy release the breath she'd been holding. He did it, she whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. He actually did it. Jenkins looked equally stunned. Never thought I'd see the day Fletcher would back down from anything. They didn't wait for the full hour to pass before returning to the valley. Daisy practically flew down the slope, throwing herself into Zach's arms with such force that he winced, then laughed, holding her tightly despite his injuries. Is it really over? She asked, searching his face. Did he mean it? I think he did, Zach replied, wonder in his voice. He's a man of his word for all his faults. If he says it's done, it's done. Jenkins approached more slowly, shaking his head in amazement. What made him change his mind, do you think? Zach looked thoughtful. Something he said about my father and about getting older. Maybe he finally realized some things aren't worth the cost. Like a 5-year vendetta over a horse, Jenkins remarked dryly. And a damaged pride, Zach added. He pulled Daisy closer. Or maybe he just recognized something worth fighting for when he saw it. 2 weeks later, a small ceremony took place in the Mission Church of San Francisco de Asís. Daisy, wearing a simple white dress she had sewn herself, stood beside Zach before Father Miguel and a handful of witnesses. Jenkins, Mrs. Wilkins, who had traveled from Denver upon receiving Jenkins's letter, and several of the friars. Zach, fully recovered from his wounds, wore a new suit purchased in the settlement near the mission. His gray eyes never left Daisy's face as they spoke their vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Father Miguel declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Their kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the future they would build together, free from the shadows of the past. The small reception that followed was joyous, with music provided by one of the friars on guitar and simple but delicious food prepared by the mission's cook. As the celebration continued, Zach drew Daisy aside to a quiet corner of the courtyard. "I have something for you," he said, producing a folded document from his pocket. "A wedding gift." Curious, Daisy opened it to find a deed for a small parcel of land just outside the settlement, near a stream that fed into the valley. "Jenkins helped me arrange it," Zach explained. "It's not much, 20 acres with a clearing where we can build a house, but it's a start." Tears of happiness filled Daisy's eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered, "our own place at last." "I thought we could build a small ranch," Zach continued, his arms encircling her waist. "Raise horses good stock, starting with Thunder's offspring. Between that and your sowing, we should make a comfortable living." "And children?" Daisy asked, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Someday," Zach's smile was tender as he placed a hand gently on her abdomen. "Someday soon, I hope. A house full of them, with their mother's courage and beauty. And their father's integrity and strength," she added, covering his hand with her own. As twilight fell over the mission, painting the white walls golden in the fading light, they rejoined their small gathering of friends. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of their new life together, with challenges and joys yet undiscovered. But for tonight, it was enough to celebrate the love that had brought them through danger and separation to this moment of perfect happiness. 10 years later, the Blackwood Ranch was thriving. What had started as 20 acres and a modest cabin had grown to over 200 acres of prime grazing land, with a comfortable 2-story house overlooking the valley. Zach's reputation as a horse breeder had spread throughout the territory, his stock descendants of Thunder and carefully selected mares sought after for their strength, intelligence, and beauty. Daisy's sewing business had expanded as well. What began as simple garments for settlers had evolved into a thriving enterprise, creating fine dresses and suits for the growing population of the settlement, which had developed into a proper town named Aspen Springs. Her designs, combining practicality with understated elegance, were particularly popular among the wives of successful miners and merchants. On a warm September afternoon, Daisy stood on the front porch of their home, watching as Zach worked with their oldest son, 8-year-old James, in the corral. The boy sat proudly atop a gentle pony, following his father's instructions with the serious concentration that reminded Daisy so much of Zach. Beside the corral, 6-year-old Elizabeth and 4-year-old Thomas were engaged in an elaborate game involving pine cones and an imaginary kingdom, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Inside the house, baby Catherine napped in her cradle, having exhausted herself with her recent discovery of crawling. Jenkins, now well into his 70s but still spry, emerged from the barn where he had been tinkering with a new saddle design. After Fletcher's death 3 years earlier, he had sold his business in Denver and moved permanently to Aspen Springs, taking up residence in a small cabin on the Blackwood property. He had become like a grandfather to the children, teaching them to fish, telling them stories of the old days, and spoiling them shamelessly at every opportunity. Mail came, he called, holding up several letters, including one from Mrs. Hollister. Daisy smiled as she took the envelope. The formidable dress shop owner had retired last year, selling her business to a young couple from St. Louis. She now lived with her sister in San Francisco, but maintained a regular correspondence with Daisy. "She's well," Daisy reported after scanning the letter. "Says San Francisco agrees with her, though she finds the younger generation's fashion sense alarming." Jenkins chuckled. "Some things never change." As the afternoon lengthened into evening, the family gathered for supper around the large oak table Zach had crafted as a fifth anniversary gift for Daisy. The meal was lively, with James excitedly describing his progress with the pony, Elizabeth announcing her intention to become a doctor like Dr. Wilson, who fixed Papa's arm last winter, and Thomas contributing occasional non-sequiturs that made everyone laugh. Later, after the children were tucked into bed and Jenkins had retired to his cabin, Daisy and Zach sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "Happy?" Zach asked, his arm around her shoulders. Daisy leaned into his embrace, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a chance encounter on a Denver street to the life they had built together. "Completely," she assured him. "You, more than I ever thought possible." He kissed her temple gently. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real you, the children, this place. After running for so long, having a home seemed like an impossible dream." "Not impossible," Daisy corrected, turning to face him, "just waiting for us to find it together." As the night deepened around them, they remained on the porch, talking softly of the day's events, plans for the children's education, dreams for the future of their ranch. When a chill finally drove them inside, they moved through the quiet house, checking on each sleeping child before retiring to their own room. In the gentle darkness, Zach drew Daisy into his arms, his kiss as tender and passionate as it had been on that long-ago night in the trapper's cabin. Their love, tested by danger and strengthened by shared joys and sorrows, remained the foundation of the life they had created, a life neither had dared to imagine when first they met. "I love you, Daisy Blackwood," Zach whispered against her lips, "today and always." "And I love you," she replied, her heart full of gratitude for the cowboy who had once put himself between her and danger, changing both their lives forever. "Today and always." Outside their window, the moon rose over the peaceful valley, bathing the Blackwood ranch in silver light, a light that would guide generations to come, born of the courage and love of those who had first made this place their home.